All right, Ronan MMA, welcome back to the channel. Now, I think that UFC 293 has been a pretty eye-opening experience for a lot of people, not just in terms of the fights themselves, but in terms of how mainstream or legacy MMA media kind of handle themselves, all right? How biased they really are, the way that they ask questions, the way that they report on the sport, the way that they favor certain fighters. We've got almost every single major MMA media outlet making excuses for Israel Adesanya, basically since the first exchange of the fight, but certainly after the final bell. We've got Dana White making a ton of excuses for Israel Adesanya, which of course are being laid up and built into the questions that the media are asking him, so all he really has to do is answer how they want him to. Do you know what I mean? Then we've got the fans of Israel Adesanya who can't just be honest with themselves about what they witnessed on Saturday night, regurgitating the same talking points that have been spouted out by the media and the UFC, okay? And it's pretty eye-opening and very annoying. Obviously, a lot of people were aware of this pre-293, but I think a lot more are aware of it now. And then we've got Eugene Bareman and the guys over at Submission Radio making excuses for Israel Adesanya, and that's what I really want to talk about today, because multiple times recently, Eugene Bareman has stuck his foot in his own mouth, okay? He had his team in general, not just him specifically, but the entire team has been very, very, very critical of fighters who have missed weight in the past, right? Israel Adesanya gave a speech, I can't remember after which fight it was, but he said that 90% of the fighter's purse should be taken away. Shane Young, if I'm not mistaken, was the only fighter on the card to miss weight, and he did so by almost 4 pounds, okay? He trains at City Kickboxing. Where's the speech about the 90% purse bullshit now? Do you know what I mean? Like, completely hypocritical. You guys shit all over fighters that miss weight. And you know what? Credit to you in that regard, because I can't stand that shit. But your own fighter did it, okay? You guys signed the dotted line to fight at a specific weight. It's half your fucking job. Do it, okay? And then we get the moment where he talked about Dricus du Plessis and, in the lead up to this, talking about how you should fight injured and all this shit, and how his fighters, and he didn't just say only for a championship opportunity, he said that all of his fighters act like champions, all of his fighters fight through injuries, all of his, he kept saying that, okay? Only for Kai Kara France to pull out a few weeks before the fight with Manel Kape, okay? So there's two boots in his mouth, his own boots, by the way, but nevertheless, he continues to do it. And then, we've got these guys over here asking him questions that he's doing it again. He's putting his foot in his mouth all over again, but not just that. He is making excuses for his fighter, which I get it, dude. He's your fighter, but you know what, man? He actively says, in this interview, says that he hates when guys do that. And I wish that people were more capable of, reading in between the lines or siphoning through the bullshit, the prefaces, the whatever, to get to the meat of what he's trying to say. Because this happens a lot, dude. You get people that are attempting to be manipulative. They'll say this much, right? Let's just put it into an essay. Maybe one of those paragraphs are what they're actually saying, and the rest is shit to build it up, okay? And I feel as though Eugene Bareman does that quite a bit in this interview. The guys at Submission Radio are coping harder than I've ever seen them cope. I've actually given them credit before in the past because of the way that they handle themselves in interviews with fighters that a lot of other media members don't treat kindly, or don't, you know what I mean, don't treat fairly even. So it's unfortunate to see, but it is what it is. I want to show you guys a couple of clips from this interview, from an interview in the past of Eugene Bareman saying something that is sticking yet another boot in his fucking mouth, okay? And then I want to talk about it on the other side.
I just want to quickly go back to the fight, because I have to ask this huge. A lot of people wondering if there's an injury or something wrong with Israel in that fight. Obviously, when you watch the exchanges, it just looked like he was maybe a second off certain shots. He was just a little bit, a centimeter off the distance, a little bit with some of the shots. He looked maybe a little bit slower in certain exchanges. So people wondering if there was some kind of health issue or reason, or maybe even overtraining or anything going into this fight that you can sort of point to as well when looking at the performance.
Let me say this, I'm not going to comment on that at all. When teams and coaches and fighters, they do that, it annoys me, because every fighter gets injured and every fighter has injuries going on. And at the end of the day, if you walk in there with an injury, you still feel confident that you can win the fight. So in that regard, he was in full, perfect health. people that I trust, people that know the sport, and there's not many people in the world that know the sport.
Us three.
There's us three.
Maybe just you.
Yeah, but there's a very, very small percentage, less than 1%. They thought there was something off with Israel a little bit that I couldn't see because I was too involved. I was too in it. Sometimes you need an outside perspective looking in. I couldn't see what they see, but I trust their opinion. I trust what they see. And I never saw that. That's the honest truth. I couldn't see what they have shared with me cage side. I had no idea. And I'm like, well,
This is during the fight, or?
No, this was after. This was post-fight. So people I trust, like well-known coaches, very smart people, have told me that they saw certain things in Israel that I couldn't see cage side. But I trust your opinion, and now I have to go back and analyze the fight myself and have a look at it.
All right, so the first clip that I've showed you guys and that I want to talk about is the guys at Submission Radio doing the exact same thing that the media members did for Dana White. They're trying to build in the excuse for Eugene Bareman. So it's almost like they're not coming out and saying it themselves, but they've been asked, and I'm not going to lie to you. Do you know what I mean? Kind of like that sort of thing. The guys at Submission Radio ask, was there an injury going into this? Is he overtrained? They bring up his strength of schedule, despite the fact that Sean Strickland, since February of 2022, has literally had one more fight than Israel Adesanya. Okay, so that's that. And Eugene Bareman says, I'm not going to comment on that. But the guy, I'm not going to comment on that. You don't need to say that, because when you say that, it's the same shit as like cannot confirm or deny. Do you know what I mean? When you hear somebody say that, you go, fuck you, dude. You know what I mean? Don't do that. Don't be ambiguous about it. Say no if you don't want to comment on it. If you don't want to take away from Sean Strickland's performance, say no. He goes on to couch his language a little bit. Oh, well, lots of fighters come into fights injured, but if they step into the cage, that means that they're confident enough that they can win anyways. So he is kind of playing into the whole injury talk, the whole something was wrong talk. And then he says, honestly, I couldn't see what everybody was talking about. And then he says that there's only 1% of people that understand the sport. So he's right here, he's flowering up what he's about to say. Look, only 1% of the people truly know the sport. And some of those people, who I trust deeply because they actually know the sport, told me that Israel Adesanya looked slow, looked off, looked sluggish. As if these people can't be coping also. As if a bunch of the analysts that know the sport, like Dan fucking Hardy, okay, who are trying to cope and process how this could have happened, it has to be that something was wrong. It can't just be that Sean Strickland's way better than you fucks thought he was. Do you know what I mean? So he couches it significantly, says, I'm not making excuses, but all these fucking people are, and I trust them. So he's essentially saying, yeah, you know what I mean? That's what he's saying, dude. He's saying, yeah, he did look slow. He did look off. He might have been injured. He might have been, I can't confirm nor deny. And it's just fucking gross, dude, because Sean Strickland whooped his ass. Sean Strickland outclassed him in every aspect. Sean Strickland exposed a massive hole in his game that nobody else has been able to expose. Sean Strickland outstruck him more than Alex Pereira did. Okay? It's unbelievable. The guy had the performance of a lifetime, and not because Israel Adesanya looked like shit, because he made Israel Adesanya look like shit. Do you know what I mean? You got people saying that these two things aren't mutually exclusive. They're not, if you add that qualifier. Yeah, he looked off, he looked like shit, because Sean Strickland made him look like shit. Not because he did right away. The dude was walking out confident as fucking all get out, dancing, feeling the music, throwing his hat up in the air. Everybody was talking about how Sean Strickland had the bad weight cut. Sean Strickland looked nervous walking out. Sean Strickland was afraid to look Israel Adesanya in the eyes, as if they haven't seen a single Sean Strickland face-off ever. Okay? He did it with Abus Magomedov, at the very least. He's done it in almost every single one. He looks at the crowd, he laughs. The dude's autistic. He can't make eye contact. Okay? It's fucking wild to me, man. It's wild to me. Stop making excuses. Your guy lost. That's it. That's it. He got outclassed in every single fucking aspect. And the guys at Submission Radio, who previously, as I said, previously before this fight week, because honestly, man, there were a few moments during media day where I was kind of like, did you guys really just fucking say that? I had quite a bit of respect for it. I thought that they handled themselves very professionally in interviews. I like, watching them talk to guys like Dan Hooker, guys like Volkanovski, guys like Robert Whittaker. They all get along really well and have similar senses of humor and shit like this. And they never struck me as the you know, super like woke and politically correct type. But when, I can't remember, I don't know which one it was, but when he said to Sean Strickland that I think you're confusing us with Russia, I was like, fuck you, okay? And now I'm like, fuck you even more. And then the next clip that I also forgot to mention this one aspect, and I wanted to make sure that it was talked about, so I recorded it, threw it in after the fact. After Israel Adesanya lost to Alex Pereira in the first fight at UFC 281, Israel Adesanya made nothing but excuses. So many people like to talk about the way that he handled that loss was so good and all this shit. He made nothing but excuses. He said he had an injury, a torn meniscus, which he never went and got surgery for, and that story was never corroborated by anybody else. He talked about how Alex Pereira hit the peroneal nerve, which he didn't, because we can see that. First of all, we know where it is on your leg. Second of all, we know what drop foot looks like. We've seen it with Chandler, we've seen it with O'Malley, we've seen it with Henry Cejudo. So he made nothing but excuses leading up to, and it's hilarious that Eugene Bareman, that's just another boot in his mouth, hates when people make excuses after the fact regarding injuries and things like that, because you may have had it, but you were still confident enough you could win. So let's not talk about it. I just thought I had to throw that in there. And then the next clip that I want to talk about.
That. I was in the next part of your
question. Just the argument for the immediate rematch.
That this is the biggest star in the sport. This is the biggest star in the sport right now. You know, arguably top three. I mean, you can count Conor out because Conor don't participate in the sport anymore. So who you got? You got Jones and you got the two best buddies, Jones and Adesanya.
Your best friends.
Your best friends, yeah. Jones and Adesanya. When you're this big in the sport, what argument is there? If anybody has an argument, put their fighter forward. If their fighter does as much for the company as Israel and makes as much money for the company as Israel does, then put your argument forward. But the fact is that, you know, Israel's been a long-serving member for the sport, for this company. He makes this company a lot of money, and he's gone out of his way for this company, so he deserves a rematch. I can't really. If there's an argument against that, then there is. I won't know about it because I won't read about it.
Yeah.
And I think as well, people are wondering what that rematch would look like as well. You mentioned that you and the coaches want to go back, look at the footage, figure the stuff out. But then I know yesterday you also said, hey, we'll do this rematch in a week's time. We'll do this rematch soon. So ideally, what is the timeline that you're looking at? Because if you want to review...
They essentially ask Eugene Bareman, why should Israel Adesanya get the rematch? Like, what's your argument for it? Okay. Because everybody thinks that that's... And you know what? Actually, I want to give credit to Luke Thomas here, because Luke Thomas has been an Izzy dick rider forever. He's been, like, since Israel Adesanya's been in the UFC, essentially. He was saying that he doesn't deserve an immediate rematch, or that he's not entitled to one. He was saying Sean Strickland beat him fair and square, there was no excuses, blah, 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 blah. He also called him out for the dog shit earlier in the week, so... Luke Thomas, who I usually can't stand almost more than any of these media guys, at least when it comes to opinion shit, not just like him breaking down something technically. He's been pretty goddamn fucking honest with his audience lately. Okay, so I appreciate that greatly, especially from a guy who is more mainstream, right? Like, I know he started off radio and then his own YouTube channel, but now he's with Morning Combat, which is Showtime, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not like the guy works for a small, tiny little thing. He's pretty mainstream, but he's also been pretty fucking honest, okay? So Eugene gets asked about the argument for the rematch, and his argument is he's the biggest star in the sport. He's the biggest star in the sport. He makes the UFC a bunch of money. This is why, blah, 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 all this shit. But that's what it comes down to, is that he's the biggest star in the sport, and it would be worth a lot of money. Now, look, would it be annoying to watch Israel Adesanya get an immediate rematch when he just had one and he's 1-2 in his last 3? Yes, it would. However, I'm almost welcoming it as long as they don't give him a year off and they make Sean Strickland wait a year before he fights Israel Adesanya again, because I think that the same thing happens again. I don't think Israel Adesanya is going to be able to all of a sudden come back a world-class boxer. The fight's going to be fought at the same range. The same weapons are going to be utilized by Sean Strickland. He had no answer for them then. He's not going to have an answer for them now, in my opinion anyways. So I almost welcome it, because I want everybody to shut the fuck up about Israel Adesanya already. Like, no, he didn't just look off. He did, and if it were to happen 2 times in a row, what's your fucking excuse? Do you know what I mean? So, and it's crazy to me that people are even making these excuses while actively calling them not excuses. No, not gonna lie, he looked like this. No, to be honest, he kind of looked like this. No excuses, though. But whenever somebody would diminish Aljamain Sterling's opponents, whenever anybody would diminish Israel Adesanya's fights, people would say, oh, what? You're going to make another excuse? Oh, if Sean O'Malley loses, people are going to say, well, he shouldn't have been in there anyways. you guys would fucking lose shit over that stuff. But now that you're doing it with Sean Strickland, who looked like a goddamn world-class boxer on Saturday night, it's totally fine. But either way, Eugene Bareman says because of the star power. Well, Euge, you got another beat in your mouth. You should get it the fuck out. Let's take a look at this fucking clip, all right?
Hamzat?
Has Hamzat fought at middleweight yet?
I knew you were going to say this.
Yeah, it's
like, we can't be ridiculous. This is the most prestigious title in the sport. Okay, sometimes business takes precedent. I understand that, but you're going to give a guy a title shot. Like you're just devaluing. You're devaluing the organization. You're devaluing the sport. You're devaluing everything that we've stood for in terms of the middleweight title and what we've done, what Anderson's done, what GSP done, what Bisping done when he won the title. You're just devaluing all of that. Like you need to ask serious questions instead of trying to get some clickbait.
No, well, I guess the serious.
Well, hang on. Do you think we're trying to get clickbait off you now, though?
Don't blame your editors for your clickbait. That's what you guys always do. You're always like, oh, I don't decide the headlines. Well, you might not.
We don't write the articles. We don't write the articles.
You might not decide the headlines, but you are the face of it, so you have some responsibility. So if you're not going to take ownership of those headlines, then that's wrong. Because that you are representing those headlines because you're the face of those articles.
So let me ask.
Now, post UFC 287, he regains his title. Right, Israel Adesanya does against Alex Pereira in a very spectacular fashion. Okay, but after Alex Pereira had just beat him, so his first immediate rematch when it comes to title fights, he gets it back. Good on him, okay? Awesome. They ask him what's next, and he's talking about how he doesn't want to fight Vettori again and whatever. And then they say, Hamzat? Question mark. Right? And Eugene Bareman loses his shit on these guys, essentially. This is like the most animated I've ever seen Eugene Bareman, the most frustrated I've ever seen him in an interview. Which I guess isn't, like, he's not screaming or anything like that, but he was definitely triggered by the question. And he's saying, no, star power, like, has he even fought at middleweight? Huge. His first 3 fights in the UFC, 2 of them took place at middleweight. So they may not have been against top 5 guys, but he's got 2 fights in the UFC in his first 3 that come at middleweight. Multiple middleweight fights before the UFC, but I mean, that's neither here nor there. But yes, he has fought at middleweight. Okay, that's 1. 2, he goes on to talk about how this is the most prestigious title in all of the sport, and we can't just corrupt it and shit like this with star power, with people who are big names getting title opportunities undeservingly so. Okay, well, Israel Adesanya is 1-2 in his last 3. He just had an immediate title rematch. He got it back. Fine. This was his first attempt at a title defense. And by the way, just some karma for him because he tried to get Dricus du Plessis or Robert Whittaker for that matter on a quick turnaround, possibly injured, possibly overtrained and exhausted because they had just gone through a training camp and fought 2 months before this date, right? And then he gets Sean Strickland, who, by the way, I've picked every single time except for this one that he has taken a fight short notice because the guy is just built different. He can come in. He's one of the only guys who can consistently come in and take advantage of short notice opportunities. And then he gets mollywopped, dude, because he was trying to get an easy fight. He was trying to get a layup. He handpicked Strickland after the Dricus du Plessis thing fell out. He wanted this fight. He got it. He got his ass beat. It is what it is, dude. And I see a lot of people trying to compare Israel Adesanya not getting, or the people crying about Israel Adesanya getting an immediate rematch are the same people who are staying quiet when it comes to Colby Covington and Stipe Miocic also getting undeserved title shots. Which look, man, there's an argument to be had that they're maybe not the most undeserving, or that they maybe are a little undeserving in terms of getting a title shot. But what I will point out is that both of those guys in their last 3 are 2-1, not 1-2. Okay, so that's all I want to point out. But regardless, I just, man, it's driving me a little crazy to see this from the mainstream media just so blatantly. We see it on a pretty regular basis, but a little more covertly, a little more cloak and dagger. Like certain headlines will be written a certain way, certain opinion pieces will be written a certain way, things like this. But to see them just shit on the new champion by way of like proxy, like they're not doing it directly, but they're doing it by saying that, well, he got a fucking injured or beat up Israel Adesanya or some shit. It's just kind of gross, man. And it's basically because they don't agree with his politics, and that's also fucking gross. Okay, so anyways, I just wanted to touch on this a little bit because I think that Eugene Bareman needs to stop putting fucking boots in his mouth. Otherwise, he's going to have no goddamn teeth left. And he's not going to be able to talk pretty soon. You know what I mean? He's going to have a mouth full of boots. Okay, but Also, I wish that these guys at not only Submission Radio, but MMA Junkie, they're going to do their podcast later. I can't wait to see what Ariel Helwani has to say about this whole shit. Like, these guys need to stop. Fuck off. Do you know what I mean? Y'all freak out when guys make excuses for TJ Dillashaw against Aljamain Sterling or the split decisions and shit like this. Don't do it. You hypocrites. Have you noticed something? I've seen way less showboating from Sean Strickland fans than I saw from Israel Adesanya fans during the entire lead up. Anyways, dude, like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. I'll see you at the next video. Bye-bye.